okay, so we're talking about technology, and just to start with that term, um, okay, I'm gonna define. I'm gonna give you an example. I'm gonna define it well for the listeners, um, because I think understanding what is and what isn't technology, and where we draw the line
Yes.
in our own use of it is pretty important. And it's not that clear because technology, it seems to me, is on some sort of a spectrum in a way. And the example I'm going to give you and the listeners is. And it's funny because it's not something I've used personally before, but the example I use is nutritional supplements. You know, like so. If we start with a very technological example of that, would be the machine-made pills that are their content has been very, very strongly chemically managed, basically, you know. But then if we move down, we have the still machine made, but it's all, they call it natural ingredients, you know, so they're maybe not transformed or processed as much. But then you could also have just basically dried plants packed in little pills, you know. And then if we move down, we have, you know, we could just take the plants and brew them in hot water for tea, herbal tea. We could also consume them raw, just take the plant, the leaves right off the plant, and that would be the least of technological intervention, if you will. But if we could go even further, and we could pray to the you know, to the spirit of the plant, or to and some sort of external god or entity. Or we could even decide to just use our minds to do what the supplements would do, you know. So I've you know, I've spanned the whole spectrum, and for me, it's not that clear where we should. Well, for me, it is. I personally have my own opinion on that, but I'm curious to know how you would see it. Like, how do we decide where we draw the line when it comes to the use of technology? Yeah.
There's two thinkers that come to mind immediately when you say that. One is Lewis Mumford, talking about the mega machine, looking at the entire process on a macro level about how things work. That's important. And the other one is Ivan Illich and his idea of conviviality, and what technology promotes conviviality and what doesn't. And then we could also add in the French, Jacques Ellul and Bernard Charbonneau, and of course, Jacques Ellul was the big critic of the technological society, and he emphasizes technique as opposed to the machine element, just the way things are done. And both of them, although one of them was a Marxist and the other one was quite on the left wing as well, and he wasn't religious. Ellul was, Charbonneau wasn't, but he came from a kind of Protestant background. But they both believed that in the Christian story, the incarnation was the critical story, about the idea of being incarnated, about in flesh, and associate with that, they prized the French kind of peasant kind of lifestyle, being close to the earth, and that context. Now, people might think that's romantic ecology, whatever. These were ahead of the game in relation to the ecological movement as well. So from that critique, they kind of came to a result. The problem is that if you come from an Irish perspective, so when I talk to old guys in Ireland, I know that they would, when they were small, have met people that survived the famine in Ireland. And the famine, of course, when 1 million people die, 1 million people emigrate, it's not that long time ago in historical terms. Why did they die? Because they were dependent on potatoes. Potatoes is not indigenous to Ireland. but they were forced to grow potatoes because it was the only marginal land left to them when the colonial force took the land. And we could also, I'm not going to speculate about the cause of the famine, but there are interesting context about that. And there are interesting contexts about the attitude towards human life. So, a number of the British administrators said that in the future it will be easier to see a Red Indian, as they called it, on the banks of the Liffey than an Irishman. Now, this attitude has not gone away. This attitude of utter disrespect for human life is there. Now, we believe that it has gone away. Now, my political argument, this is the context of politics, my argument that I make, and I'll make it clearer and clearer over time, is that the European empires never went away. And in particular, the greatest empire of them all, the British Empire, changed, it transmuted, it didn't disappear. It transmuted into a different form, in particular in the 1920s. They realized that they wouldn't be able to run the colonies. So they shifted into commerce, finance, regulation, international trade, and to establish the global systems. That's laid out by H.G. Wells. It was intuited by Churchill and that. And so you had all the thinkers in the 1920s telling about what the future would be like. And they realized that they were in a good position to control the communications technology. They had the communications network. They had the undersea cables, the telegraph system very much involved, etc. So they're in a good position to control this apparatus that would be the future, which is why people like Arthur C. Clarke is so interested in communication technology, fits into that. In 1947, he said he was convinced by a speech by Arthur Toynbee in Senate House in London about, the British Empire creating the scaffolding, or the Anglosphere creating the scaffolding for this New World Order. So you have to look at what their policies are in these things. So whatever you and me decide to do is dependent as well on these macro forces. So what are they trying to do? What are the things that they've said? They've made it very, very clear. The world of flesh and the devil is an example, and the 28, 29. J.D. Bernal, and they identified the key elements of this movement, that there's space travel. Why space travel? Well, because they want to get off the planet, because they know what's going to happen when they've done what they're going to do to it. Basically, that seems to be an escape route. So space travel, and of course, they're going to become interplanetary. But there's first, the A reason is to have an escape route. The B reason is to travel for resource. That comes kind of afterwards. Life extension is another key factor, to extend life. They want to extend life, and they want to increase intelligence. And this is done, according to Bernal, and this was supported, I think, by Birkenhead and Lord Birkenhead and other people that were in government. Now, Earl Birkenhead and Churchill had negotiated with the Irish Republicans in 1921. So this is the context. They're realizing they can't do this all the time, that the people that are fighting against the empire will keep coming, will keep engaging. So they're saying, okay, we'll go the Wells way, basically, as Wells and Churchill were close together. So space travel, life extension, intelligence increase are three elements, and that involves a total transformation of the human into a mechanical being. That the human becomes a machine, and this is where all the Matrix ideas go back to. So this is where Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is informed by. The babies are born, in ectogenesis, and like in the Matrix. It goes back to this plan that they have to make humans machines, basically, and that would solve the biological problem, because all of these guys that drive this agenda, like J.D. Bernal, who was a Stalinist as well. A lot of them were quite extreme left. H.G. Wells thought that Stalin was a great man. Maybe he didn't plan enough, but they had great admiration for Bolshevik Russia. J.D. Bernal, the great crystallographer, wrote a beautiful obituary for Stalin, praising him as a great scientist, because of course That's what Stalin described as scientific socialism. So they're all involved in a very strong idea about creating this material future, informed obviously by Nietzsche and the Superman, the superhuman, the Übermensch, all that kind of stuff. But this transfer to material is important because they don't like the vulnerability of the human body. They don't like this fleshiness. They don't like this incarnation. They want to be as gods, and they want to make people machine-like and tied up to the system. And of course, coming from an imperial system, which is designed to control people, this is an ideal way to control people if you force them into a system. And of course, it's predicated on the idea as well of Darwinian evolution. And Darwinian evolution was promoted by Thomas Henry Huxley, who promoted this anti-spirit idea, agnosticism, which means you have to prove things scientifically in order for them to exist. So if you say you have a mystical experience, you'd have to prove it in some way scientifically, which is impossible to do. They take the seer out of, well, almost, but they take the seer out of the thing. They ignore the very thing that they claim doesn't exist for the benefit of their equation. And Huxley was H.G. Wells' teacher, and Wells brought on the thing, and following on from Wells, you had Arthur C. Clarke, and so you have this thing. So then when we come to modern people, people get annoyed when I say, look, you have to look at some of your heroes again. They really get annoyed. They say, oh yeah, I agree with you, but you can't say anything about Terence McKenna. I get this all the time. You're wrong about him. Yeah, and they get really kind of protective about Terence McKenna or Robert Anton Wilson. Now I like these guys. Well, I ask people to listen to what they go. I have more respect for them because I listen to what they actually said. Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary. If you look at what they say, all their agenda is consistent with what the guys said in the 1920s. So what I ask myself is, where does this fit into the overall picture? We have to go back to what they said they were going to do. And if it's furthering that aim, then, so if the judge, Elon Musk, space travel, he's not so big in the life extension, but he is on the intelligence increase and the brain-computer interface. It's all written now. So it's all in the plan. And even Thomas Henry Huxley, the name of the club he set up of scientists to enter into other institutions was called the X Club. So I, of course, when I see SpaceX, Twitter, I say, well, this is where it comes from. I mean, this is the pattern. You can't ignore the historical context. They're telling you straight up, as far as I can see. It's utterly consistent. So when it comes to the issue of food, there's a few principles in relation to distinguishing transhumanism from humanism. That the restoration, first principle is the restoration of normal human expectations is not transhumanism. Because you're only restoring a humanism. It's restorative. It's not an enhancement. It's not an addition and augmentation. So so for example, Harrington would see the contraceptive pill as a classic example of a transhumanist move to suppress something in the human body, a direct influence different from taking a vitamin C or something. So that's one principle. The second one is that obviously, the closer you get to its source in some original context, the better in general, the closer it is to the environment we're adapted to. And here is the thing that doesn't make sense. For 160 years, whatever, the scientists have been drilling us with the significance of natural selection. So when we come to the point where the principle is accepted, they immediately shift to artificial selection. Well, because it's natural selection, we're not doing that anymore. It's artificial selection. So it doesn't make sense. If you understood natural selection, you'd say, okay, well then what we're going to do is live more consistent with our abilities that we're adapted to. But the policy is to adapt the environment. Now, this goes back longer. This goes back to Francis Bacon. And Francis Bacon And the idea of plantation, the idea of colonization was about changing the environment to suit power, not all mankind, to suit power structures. So you change the environment. You create a technosphere. This is where all the Crystal Palace, all these ideas came from. We're going to create in the what Dawkins called the extended phenotype. We're going to create the world, and we're going to adapt the world to our need. Now, here is the problem. Last point: post-humanism critiques all humans. So you're responsible for this. You and people like you, and especially, and even on the basis of the color of your skin, you're more responsible for this. Unbelievable. This is the way they do it. They haven't read Irish history, but it's unbelievable. This. So what that is, what I believe is that this is part of the continuation of that, if you like, capitalist, whatever you want, technological. I see the capitalists and communists as the same materialist system. They're trying to blame everyone, so we won't blame the people who are responsible, the people with the resources. That's what the objective. It's the whole lot of humankind, and this gives them the legitimacy to interfere directly in the human and also to eradicate them. That's what the consequence of it is. So, sorry, I went on too long there a bit, Dominic. Apologize.
No. I've listened to you before. I know how it works. I love it.